Hello everyone, welcome back, and this is part 6 of EF4 2.0, and today we are going to discuss the database configuration using Fluent API. So the same thing we have achieved through our data annotations API, and the same thing we want to use it through the Fluent API. So it's depend on developer to developer or the team of architect what they want to decide on that, what they are going to use, whether the data annotations or whether they want to use a Fluent API. So on those cases you might need both of these, either that or this one. So let's see how we can implement the same things like applying the configuration, changing the table name, adding a primary key, and giving a constraint name. And if you want to change any column name in your database, and applying null, not null, and the computed columns. So if we'll go to our demo projects which we are working on, let's say I have a user class where I want to apply some configuration. Let's say I want to change this user default table name as something else, and this user ID primary gives different name, and first name, last name, and this one I want to make it as a since. See if you can see full name is at the end. Instead of you provide an input for this first name, last name, and again adding a first name, last name, but does not make any sense. So this column we can make it as a computed column, so it will automatically take the first name, last name separated by comma, or we can give some kind of a space there, so you don't need to provide this as an input. Then email. Okay, so let's go to the your EFDB context. If you will see in the model builder, we have to define the configuration on model creating. So let's say for this user entity class I want to change my table name. For that I have to give to table. Yeah, so here you can define the table name. Say I want to give as a demo hyphen users. Okay, this, and I want to define, see by default if you have not defined any ID column in your entity class, as we discussed in the last series or last videos, it is going to throw an exception saying that primary key not found. So let's see that. Let's try to run that and what we get. So if you will run this applications, so showing users. Okay, we set it. I think this I might have used somewhere. That's why it's throwing exception. Okay. The entity type user requires a primary key to be defined. So entity framework by default search for a name called ID. Since we have given this property name as a user ID, so it will not consider this as a primary key. In order to enforce this as a primary key, we have to give a different configuration saying that this user class has key, and that key is my user ID. Okay, and the two, since you're defining a constraint by giving a primary key, you can give the constraint name also, and you can just say has name called let's say user hyphen pk. Okay, now So we have given the table name, we have defined a primary key, and we have given a constant name as well. Let's see if it is runs. Let me just add few more configuration. Let's say for this user I want to this user this property name is what, t dot email. Okay, my email should be not null, so I have to give is required is. So if you will see, the parameter in this function is by default true. So if you are defining is required false, then only you have to specify false, so it will make it as a nullable column. If you are not defining as a false, then by default it will be a true, means you cannot provide any null value in this email address. And let's say I want to change the name of this column, then let's say has column name you can use, and I will just say email address. Okay, so what I have defined, I have given the user table name, key, property name we have changed using the has column name. And for this particular property, in order to, if you want to change any other property name, you have to just specify that property. And let's say first name, full name, last name, profile, roles, any property name if you want to change, then you can use this functions. Now say we have given the key, I have changed the name, and is required also we have seen, nullable not nullable. Now let's jump to the our computed column, how we can define the computed column. So computed column I want to define for my property called full name. Okay, since I don't want to provide any kind of input for this particular property, so I'll just say has computed column SQL, and here I have to provide the SQL. Let's say hyphen first name plus comma. I have to take care of the syntax because this is how it's going to execute, so there shouldn't be any syntactical issue. Then I'll say last name, that's it. So this is going to be my computed column. So okay, so now let's execute this, and since in my program I'm already inserting one value, let's say here, so user with name, last name, email address. So since I'm not giving any full name detail, it should automatically insert in the table. So let's try to execute that. Just say console dot read key. Come on. So we have covered 1 2 3 4 5 6 7. Okay, okay, I think it is done. Now let's go to the database and check ef core tables, and let's see. So the user table name we have changed to demo users using our Fluent API configuration. In the columns, if you will see, for email address we have given not null, means is required, and we have given primary key as a user ID, and for that user ID we have given constraint name as a user hyphen user underscore pk. If you will see here, this is your primary key, this is your constraint name, this is the email address which is required, this is the computed column. So let's see, The full name is computed column, and let's see if the data comes automatically. See, so full name Deependra space Kushwaha automatically got inserted. We don't need to specify anything. Now, see, everything looks good except these repetitive things. Like if you want to define, let's say, for 10 properties in your user class, you have to repeat the same thing 10 times, copy paste again and again, and then individually you have to define for the each property. So here you go with the benefit of entity framework code. They have given some kind of like a existing interface which you can implement in, you can directly assign to this. We'll see how you can do that. Let's so in your model builder class you have some method called apply configuration. So apply configuration that is defined in identity type configuration. So for particular entity you can define the configuration. So let's say only for the demo purpose I'm creating a class in this same file, but you should be creating in a different file as well. So let's say I'm giving user configuration, and it should be okay coming from my entity type configuration, and which kind of entity you have. For the user entity I want to define the configuration. So once you add this interface, it will ask you to implement the methods it will enforce you. So once you'll implement that method configure, we'll have this extension called parameter called builder. So instead of doing here everything, we'll just copy this, paste it here. Instead of builder we'll say model builder. So in this case you are just segregating the stuff. So for each kind of entity you can define the configuration in different file itself, and then you can map it to your db context. So in your db context class will be more clean. So let's apply this configuration model builder dot apply configuration. So which user, okay, for the user entity you want to apply the configuration, have to say new user configuration. Yeah, so if you are applying user configuration you don't need to define explicitly which kind of entity it is, it will automatically take care. So same thing we are doing, but using a your entity type configuration instead of keeping everything in a same method inside. So just think about the scenario. If you have hundreds of classes, and in the hundred of classes you have a lot of properties, so this you're going to just mess up with this method. So in order to segregate that and clean your EFDB context, they have given one more interface called identity type configuration, where you can configure your entity classes and keep them all in a single folder or separate somewhere you want to keep. So now let's see how it goes. What I'll do, I'll just delete this db and we'll see. Okay, remove that. Okay, so meanwhile it comes. Let's okay, now it has come. Let me talk to you later. Let's see. Okay, ef demo, we have a table, and yes, we have a demo user. The same configurations which we applied previously got applied now as well, so that works perfectly. See, so this is the benefit of ef core, the additional functionality they have added. I'm not sure whether it's available in the previous version of EF entity framework. It might be available in the 6 or something, but not sure. You gotta check it out. So that's it for today, and in the next video session we are going to discuss about the complex object or your value object, how you can store the value object in entity framework class. So in the entity framework we have a separate methods which we are going to use for applying the complex object in your entity framework. So we are going to discuss on that. So that's it for today. Have a nice day. Bye bye.